Good evening. Good evening. I am Sabrina Clark, the president of the Atlanta Suburban Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And on behalf of our over 400 plus members, I would like to welcome you to an informative session on preparing for home ownership. The Atlanta Suburban Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, affectionately known as ASAC, is dedicated to providing quality programs and leading the way in economic development within our community. Would you like to purchase a home or an investment property, but don't know where to start? Would you like a realtor and or mortgage broker to assist in the process, but need a trusted advisor? We hope that there will be information shared tonight that will assist you on your home ownership journey. I would like to thank our Economic Development Committee for continuing to create impactful programming, and a special thank you to our presenter, Sarah Raquel Ubamba. Again, welcome and thanks to the audience for joining us this evening. Please enjoy the webinar.
Hi, we have a few housekeeping pointers for tonight's webinar. Number one, your mic is muted. Everyone wants to hear the valuable information that the presenter has, so we're asking all attendees to mute their microphones to eliminate background noises. Number two, engage us in the chat. Please post your questions to the speaker in the chat. We will also post a survey link in the chat at the end of the session. Number three, minimize multitasking. Multitasking may interfere with your reception. And lastly, media disclaimer. You have entered an area where photography, audio, and video recording may occur. By entering the event premises, you consent to such recording media and its release, publication, exhibition, or reproduction.
Thank you. Tonight's speaker, Raquel Obumba, was born in Southern California and migrated to Atlanta in 2002 to attend Spelman College, where she majored in economics. After her matriculation at Spelman in 2006, she was encouraged to obtain her Georgia real estate license while she was waiting to begin her corporate consulting job to serve as a side hustle at the very least. Since obtaining her license in 2006, Raquel's real estate career has blossomed into much more than just a side hustle. In 2015, Raquel passed the Georgia Real Estate Brokers exam, and in 2016, Raquel, along with one of her good friends from Morehouse, decided to launch Millennial Properties Realty, a full-service real estate brokerage firm providing buyer, seller, and investor representation. The mission of Millennial Properties Realty is to help clients create generational wealth through real estate. Raquel is a co-owner and the managing broker of Millennial Properties Realty, where she not only assists clients with their real estate needs, but also provides broker support to the Millennial Properties Realtors operating under the firm's name. Raquel also holds a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Michigan. Raquel was recognized by the Atlanta Realtors Association as a top producer in 2021 and 2022. Raquel is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and was initiated through the Atlanta Suburban Alumni Chapter in 2018. Raquel is married and has 3 children. We are excited to present to you Raquel Obumba, a real estate expert and tonight's featured speaker. Give me 1 second. Get up to the top.
Thank you for the warm introduction from my chapter, and welcome everyone. I'm happy to have the opportunity to share with you about home ownership and investing in real estate. So although Sora Hutchins gave a great introduction, and this is just some summary of my background, if you want to call it, one thing I want to specifically point out is that I am also a real estate investor. So I'm coming from a perspective of actually doing this myself. So I want to kind of provide extra notoriety, if you want to call it. So my goals for this presentation is to boost your knowledge about investing in real estate, boost your confidence in taking the first step in beginning or continuing to build your real estate portfolio, dispel common myths about investing in real estate, and provide you with real scenarios, case studies where real estate investments played a pivotal role in creating and perpetuating generational wealth. So I want to start with making sure everybody understands the different types of real estate that people can invest in. So there's the traditional owner occupant. That's the house that you choose to live in. There's investor real estate. So you can buy and hold. You can buy and flip and sell. You can buy, flip, and hold. There's also commercial real estate. So the office spaces that we go into, the retail spaces we go into, the warehouses that you see, people do own those types of things, types of real estate. Another option is owning land. And the last is REIT, which is called real estate. Actually, it's escaping me right now, but basically it's a group of people that own real estate and purchase real estate as a collective. So what is the one thing you need to invest in real estate? Money. We know that, right? But there's some people that we know that they may have the savings right now, and there's others that may not have a very vast savings. How much will a lender require for a down payment? So for owner-occupied property, you can expect anywhere between a 0% down payment, or you can expect between 10% or 15, excuse me, my light just went on, or 15 to 25% down for investment properties. So where do you start? The answer really is not one place. As you can see in this picture, you start at different points because it really depends on where you are. So first, I want everybody to check their credit regularly. I check my credit weekly. I might be a little bit obsessive, but I just have a thing for making sure my credit is still in good health. This will allow you to have a good idea of your current credit health, help you determine areas you need to clean up, and determine if you have the score to qualify for a mortgage. The lowest credit score I have seen of being able to qualify for a mortgage is a 580. That is not to suggest that you should strive for the minimum, because that minimum will limit you in your ability to buy down some of your interest rates. I put in here a QR code so everybody can scan the screen to go to the Credit Karma website now. Do it while I'm talking, still pay attention, but still check your credit. I personally have the Credit Karma app on my phone that I can very easily tap into, just so you understand where you're at. I have been somewhere, I had my millennial property shirt on, and this lady stopped me and she said, "Oh, do you do things with apartments?" And I was like, "Oh no, I'm a real estate broker." And she said, "Oh, I want to buy a house, but my credit is bad." And I was like, "How do you define bad?" And she said, "Well, I have a 620. I said, "That's not bad." And quite frankly, because people think an 800 credit score is what you need, that's not true. Right? It'd be great if you could get there, but that is not what is needed to purchase a property. As I mentioned, 580 is the minimum. There are some additional programs out there that are lease to own type programs that will even accept lower than the 580. But I want everybody to be very, very clear on where they stand with their credit. Next, you need to determine the source of your down payment. So that, again, and even though I've mentioned that there's some programs that are 0% down, there are some closing costs that could be involved and require you to bring some money to the table. So I don't want it to make it seem like a 0 down payment means you pay $0 to close. That's not true. But there are different sources of where you can get your down payment. That you can acquire a property. So there's loans, that's the mortgage. You can have your personal savings, down payment assistance programs. These are typically income-based and location-based. So some of the counties have them, some of the cities have them, and some of them are actually forgivable programs. So they will give you money up front, and as long as you meet the residency requirement, meaning that you stay in the property for 5, 10 years, and as your primary residence, and you do not refinance your loan, they will forgive that money. I personally witnessed it. My husband purchased our property in 2010 using a down payment assistance program. At that time, there was a lot of foreclosures, and they were trying to get some of those foreclosures sold. So they were offering a lot of people down payment assistance to purchase these foreclosed properties. And our grace period or waiting period was 6 years. So after 6 years, we got a letter in the mail that said that I think it was $14,000 was forgiven. You can use your retirement. So I've had some buyers that have tapped into their 401k to get their down payment money. And I believe, now talk to your accountant. So I'm not an accountant, but I believe you can do that without penalty. So that is definitely something you can tap into if you have a job that you contribute to your retirement on every paycheck. Look into that as an option to getting the funds for your down payment and closing. So family, there's gift funds. Now, some people are like, what, but there's literally people who their family can write their child, cousin, sister a check to cover the down payment and closing costs. So that's not to say go run and ask, them for tens of thousands of dollars, but that is an option if you have a family member that has access to some extra funds. And friends can contribute as well as gift funds. And for the investment side of it, so the flips, renovations, you can have silent investors, or you can have not so silent investors help you with generating the funds you need for the acquisition of the property, as well as the renovation costs. And then you can utilize your current real estate assets. As I mentioned, again, on my first slide, I wanted to highlight that I'm a real estate investor. I will give you kind of my case study a little bit later in the presentation, but that's exactly what my husband and I did. We took out, we refinanced our home and took out money from our current equity and used that money to pay down some bills. We took a nice vacation, and we used a good portion towards the down payment for our first investment property. So and that's one of the beauties of real estate, is the leverage that it offers you. So while back in 2010, when he purchased this property, I don't think his 27-year-old self thought this is going to help lead me to purchasing one and our second investment property. So after we've assessed our credit, we've figured out some options of getting close to getting the down payment and closing costs, you want to calculate your debt to income ratio. Now, I will say that a loan officer or lender can assist you with this, but if you want to understand what they're really looking at, this next slide will help you. So your debt to income ratio is going to look at your monthly expenses. So that's mortgages if you currently own a property, car payments, the minimum student loan payment. The minimum, and I'm emphasizing minimum because, again, I get called all the time, well, I have a student loan and I don't think I can qualify. Well, as long as your monthly payment is reasonable and fits within your, reasonably within your actual income that you bring in, you can qualify for a home with student loans. And the same with credit cards. Now, again, if you have high credit card bills, that means your credit is going to be affected. But again, they're still only going to look at the minimum monthly payments because that's what you're obligated to pay each month. Any outstanding medical bills that you're paying on, and personal loans that are actually documented on your credit report. Some other things to consider is if you are responsible for paying child support or alimony, they are going to take that into consideration as well as a part of calculating your debt to income ratio. So now we're going to do a little bit of a math problem. So and one thing to keep in mind, so for income, your lender is going to look at your pre-tax, your gross. Remember, gross is like, man, I wish I got that much. So you're looking at your pre-tax monthly income. And let's say that's $5,000. So because the ideal debt to income ratio is 45% of your total monthly income, I multiplied that 5,000 by 45% and got $2,250. So that represents the maximum amount that you should be able to dedicate to debt each month. So that, if you look over to the other side, that's all those car payments, those student loans, those credit cards. And then we're going to start subtracting from that. So if your monthly car note is $500, your monthly student loan payment is $250, and your monthly credit card payments are $100, the remaining balance is $1,400, which can be available to cover a monthly mortgage. And so that's how the lender is going to arrive at the amount that you are in fact pre-qualified for. So even if you have a high income, that's great, but the lender does not want you to use 100% of your income towards housing. And because it puts them at risk of you foreclosing. It's not necessarily fiscally responsible to spend that much money on it. Now, apartments are very different, right? As long as you have the income, and if you got $2 after that, they probably don't really care as long as you're going to pay them. But that is not the case with a mortgage. They are going to want to make sure that you are comfortable and you can give them their money each month. So this is that general math problem that they are going to do when you approach them about getting pre-approved. Now, for my higher income people, what I suggest, I always tell my clients this: if you have a high income, they're going to pre-qualify you for $1 million, right? But if you know you specifically don't want to pay more than a specific amount, tell them that. Hey, mortgage lender, I don't want to spend no more than $3,000 on my mortgage, because they'll back into your pre-approval amount so that you know exactly how much house we need to go out and look for, because that initial number of that $1 million may scare you, and you don't want to spend that much money, but you also don't have really a good sense of what your monthly payments will be unless you tell them, like, this is what ideally where I want my monthly payment. So once we've done our math problem, which is calculating all your debt, this quick breakdown is just so I want you to stay under 49% for your debt to income ratio. Some loan products, and again, I'm not a loan officer. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not a loan officer, will be able to work with you and say, hey, if you pay off this card, if you pay this off, if you get this down, if you show proof that, it's going to be taken care of, then they'll start eliminating that, and they can do what they call a rescore and look at your debt to income ratio from that perspective. But if you have basically too much debt, that's going to limit your ability to qualify for a loan. So who do you need to contact? You need to contact a bank or a mortgage broker. They're going to be able to assess your financial profile and determine if you're in fact eligible for a mortgage. And what I like to tell people all the time, a lot of times with a mortgage broker, it's really so much not right now versus a no, like a hard and fast no. So they may say, okay, you need to get this cleaned up, and they can give you a path towards being able to qualify for that. That's why I like people to start with working with a mortgage broker. You can contact your bank, you can Google mortgage broker. I can provide you with some recommendations if you would like, but but a lot of times they start with me, right? Hey, Raquel, I want to buy a house, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Because I'm still going to direct you back towards that mortgage broker, because that's going to help us kind of devise our plan, right? Because here's the thing, I don't want to show you houses that you don't qualify for, because then you'll be disappointed. And then it's honestly, and to put it very blunt, it's a waste of time, because if, let's say, we go under contract on a house that you can't afford, now we've gotten the seller excited, they're starting putting their plans in place, and you can't afford the house. But on the flip side, if you're not pre-qualified, you may say, I only want a house for $300,000, but then you may be able to qualify for $500,000 and be comfortable with the monthly payment. So you don't want to sell yourself short. So that's why you really want to have that conversation until you can understand your financial health and where you can go if we're going to go the mortgage route. And then you're going to contact a realtor. So I would always say, I like to say, work with people that you know, that you trust, and that you get a good rapport with. A realtor can help you determine the available homes in your price point. So again, you may say, oh, I don't know, I don't like any of these homes. So then again, you may then go back to the mortgage broker and say, well, what can I do to bump me up $25,000 extra, because I'm not seeing anything I like in this particular price point. And then a realtor is there to guide you through the process, help you navigate through the unforeseen obstacles, which I could be on here for hours and hours and hours telling you about the unforeseen obstacles that I have had to help clients navigate through. But ultimately, the goal is to get you to the closing table, and you want someone who has the tenacity to go to bat for you when necessary, can keep a calm demeanor, and like I said, really help you navigate through. Because even though I know sometimes real estate seems very scary, it is likely the highest, most expensive investment that someone is going to make in their lives. But you want someone in your corner who knows what they're doing and can help you truly, truly navigate through those obstacles, because many people have wanted to give up. But when you get to that closing table, it feels good. And sometimes you forget the obstacles you've been through. So real quick, so now that we've gotten your credit in order, we've calculated your debt to income ratio, we know the source of your down payment, and we also, have gotten you pre-approved. I want to just quickly take you through the general very high level overview of what to expect during the home buying process. So as I stated, we're going to start with getting pre-approved. We're going to contact our bank. We're going to contact a mortgage lender. A mortgage broker to get you pre-approved. Then you're going to begin working with a realtor to help you find homes that fit your search criteria. Then we're going to submit an offer and go under contract if the offer is accepted. Then sometimes there's some negotiations back and forth. You may offer low and they may come back at high. Again, counter offers is a lot. Sometimes it happens a lot on different things. It could be purchase price, it could be closing date, it could be the closing attorney that we're choosing. It could be a number of things that you're going to negotiate and go back and forth on. Then once you're under contract, you're gonna officially apply for your loan. So all you've done pretty much in the pre-approval process is provided the lender with your documents and to show proof that you in fact are qualified to purchase this property. But then once you have a property under contract, that's when you officially apply for your loan. And then within 3 days of that, the loan officer is going to send you a loan estimate. So that's going to help you understand what your estimated closing costs are going to be, which includes your down payment and other fees that are included in that to close. And it's also going to give you an estimate of what your monthly payments will look like. And that must be sent within 3 business days of submitting the application to the loan officer. Then you're going to be in your due diligence period. So now in that hyper market between end of 21 and through 2022, there were some buyers that were foregoing their inspection period. I personally didn't like that phase because I feel like you need to inspect. And again, quite frankly, even ask the sellers to make some repairs, reasonable repairs, but repairs. So I put this right here because there's some upfront costs that have to come out of your pocket before you get to the closing table. And one of them is the inspection. So you can expect anywhere between $350 to $500. Sometimes it could go a little higher depending on the size of the property. And sometimes depending on how far the inspector has to travel to get to the property. So once we have the inspection, you can fully determine, and it's not in the due diligence, it's not just the inspection. So I personally have my clients go drive by at night, go drive by at different parts of the day. When we saw the house, that was only a snapshot in time. That was not every day. And the only time you're really going to understand what it looks like every day is when you live there. But if you go at night and you're like, whoa, this is not what I wanted, that due diligence period will allow you to truly determine if this is the house for you and that you want to move forward. So take that time to research, to ask questions of the neighbors, do your due diligence. So then you're going to also, within this period, submit your earnest money. So that is an upfront deposit, if you want to call it. But that money will go towards your closing costs. So let's say, for example, you put up $5,000 in earnest money. And at the closing, the lender says your total closing cost is $25,000. Because you've put up that $5,000 upfront, you only need to submit wire $20,000 to in fact close from there. Now, earnest money is refundable if you terminate the contract in your due diligence period. If for some reason, if you have if you have a finance contingency on your contract, and for some reason you get denied for your loan, that's not necessarily your fault, then you can get your earnest money back. If the house does not appraise and you and the seller cannot come to terms on a new price, or if you decide to pay what they call an appraisal gap, that means giving a little bit more money towards the property, even though it may not necessarily be deemed worth that much, and you and the seller can just not come to terms, then you can terminate and get your earnest money back. Now, that is only if you have a finance contingency or an appraisal contingency in place on your contract. Otherwise, outside of your due diligence period, the seller could, and I emphasize could, I've worked where the seller was technically owed earnest money, but they were willing to be nice and gave the buyer back their earnest money. But if it's outside of that due diligence period, the seller could seemingly keep your earnest money. So that's why you want to really, truly do your due diligence within that period. And typically, I would say for residential, expect between 5 to 10 days. It can go a little longer depending on the house and depending on the circumstance, but expect between 5 to 10 days. So next, you're going to have to pay for your appraisal. That is when an appraiser will come out and assess the value. They're going to be looking at comparable properties in the neighborhood, surrounding area, recent sales to determine what the true value of the property is. You do have to pay for this up front. Your lender will send you, I'm assuming, a link just in the day and age that we're in right now to pay for this, but it is something that's due up front. And again, as I wanted to reemphasize, the reason I have prices right here is because this is something that you need to plan for before we start this process to make sure that you have access to those funds. So then another thing that you're going to have to do while you're in the loan process is to secure a homeowner's insurance policy. And then the lender will walk you through what you need to do, but you can go with your car insurance company, but you will be required, if you have a loan, to secure homeowner's insurance prior to closing. So again, shop around, but that is something that you can expect to have as a part of your homework assignment per se when you're under contract. And so then there are going to be some conditions. I've had people come back and they call what they LOE, letter of explanation. Why did you have $5,000 deposited into your account? Where did it come from? Can you explain this? I have recently had somebody, another agent on my team, they just needed someone to explain that the money that they were depositing was for child support. And so there are little conditions, some little, some big, conditions that need to be cleared to give the underwriter the confidence that you are eligible for this process. Clear those conditions fast. Don't let you, I don't want myself, any other realtor you work with, they don't want to have to get the call from the lender that says, hey, your buyer, I asked your buyer for this and they haven't responded. Respond to the people, provide them with whatever they are asking for. And then the glorious day, closing day. So get your mind, stretch your hands, because you're going to be signing. I actually had a closing today and my client was just like, oh my goodness. And she has a long name. So she had to sign a lot of paper. So, but that day feels really good. And again, I didn't insert any obstacles in here, but that we know some may come up. But again, that day feels really good. Not just for me as a real estate professional, but for you as the buyer, because now you in fact own that house and you are a homeowner. So going into investment property. So this case study is my own property. So as I mentioned earlier, my husband purchased our property in 2010. In 2018, like I mentioned, we refinanced our loan and pulled money out of that, out of the house. And then we had a decent savings, but it wasn't, a whole lot per se. And we had a decent credit and debt to income ratio. So one quick thing, how you utilize home equity to get cash. So if you're in the group of, you're here because you want to possibly leverage your current property, you're going to assess the current value of your home, and then you're going to assess your current mortgage amount. And then you're going to determine the usable amount of equity. So the way to think about this is, if let's say your house is worth, for simple math purposes, $100,000, you can only take a home equity line of credit and or pull money out at 80%. So we're only at $80,000. But then let's say you have a mortgage of $40,000 on that. So now you can only pull out $40,000 out of that house. You cannot pull out all 100%, because really what they're going to do is restart your loan. So they're going to take so if you take the 40 and you owed 80, now then your new loan will be $120,000. So, but you also will get that $40,000 to use how you see fit. And then again, the last little thing here, you process your home equity line of credit or do a refinance. Now, given this high interest rate, HELOC, that's the acronym for home equity line of credit. The HELOC may be your better option, because if you have the lower interest rate of, what was that, 2020 to 2021, then you likely don't want to refi to these 7% and 8% interest rates. So again, you can pull out the equity from your home, but it's at an 80% of the value less the current mortgage. If you have a current mortgage, if you don't have a mortgage, then it's 80% that you can pull out. So, this picture is a little bit over top of it, but I can speak through. So this is the Obumba investment property. This was our first property that we acquired. We purchased it in 2019. It's located in Decatur. We purchased it for $110,000. Our down payment was 20%, and we paid $22,000. I couldn't remember exactly what the total cash to close was, but I believe it was about $27,000 that we paid, which included our down payment and our closing costs. The monthly mortgage is $895.27. And currently our tenant is paying $1,250. and we have a net profit of $354.73. Now, our mortgage has gone up with taxes. So one of the things to think about, your mortgage, so your principal and interest of your mortgage will stay the same for the entire life of the loan. But what will fluctuate your payments is if your homeowner's insurance increases and or decreases, and your property taxes increase or decrease. So our property taxes have increased. Again, I'm sure most people know that the values of homes have significantly increased over the last couple of years. My husband has told me that we are due for a rent increase because we have not increased our rent from when we first acquired it. As I was creating this slide, I felt like, I was like, he might be onto something. So as a landlord, I do have the ability to increase that rent. But again, every month, once I get paid the rent, I'm netting at least $354.73. Sometimes my tenant is late, so I get an extra $50. So it's almost about $400 a month sometimes. But our current estimated equity is $116,000, $176.94. So this is something that we can leverage for later. I recently, I would say this current year, posted a video on my page where I got the idea. My parents invested in properties when I was growing up. So that's where it just was ingrained in me to invest in properties. And the video that I posted on my page was basically saying, like, buy an investment property for each child. I have 3 children. Right now we have 2 investment properties, and technically we have our current home. So it's 3 properties. And they said, use that equity to buy it now. I can sell that property when my child goes to college, purchase up if they choose not to go to Spelman. And they need to live somewhere else, or I could probably still do it in Atlanta if necessary. But let's say they go out of state, I can purchase a property in that state with this equity right here, and then have them have roommates, and the roommates pay the rent, and then just keep the cycle going. So that really resonated with me, because I was like, real estate really does truly provide you with a leverage. And while I don't want to say that $22,000 is not a lot of money, but if you are someone that has a hefty savings, then, again, now the property is worth more now, right? Because the real estate has increased. But I just heavily encourage you to consider. So I've been actually helping a lot of people this year acquire properties in Macon, Georgia. They have very, very affordable prices. I had a client recently that purchased a property with a tenant already occupied. She purchased it for $99,000. And she only put 15% down, but has a generous net profit each month. And that tenant is using the Section 8 voucher or Housing Choice voucher. So that rent is paid directly to her through the Macon Housing Authority. And so she has this asset that she already has instant equity in it because she put, down the 15%. But again, it's adding additional funds to her account. She has an additional asset because she has her current property as well. So it really truly is something to consider. And then a lot of times the way I like to think about investment property is it's really just an upfront cost. So like I said, the $27,000 I believe that we paid to close on the property, that was our initial investment. And outside of maybe 2 months that when our first tenant moved out of the property and we had to get it cleaned up and painted and things, other than that, I haven't paid, air quote, paid my mortgage, right? Because the tenant's rent has covered my mortgage. And if for someone who doesn't necessarily own an owner-occupied home, you'll remember that the month that you close on a property, so for example, I had a closing today, my client's first payment is not going to be until December because you technically skip a month. So that first month you're getting the rent and you don't have a mortgage to pay. So you can bank that for your reserves for repairs that you may need to make. But it truly is something that can, like, you're not paying, like, it's just the initial investment, especially if you buy something that is already occupied. Now, it is pretty easy to get a property occupied. I had a client close in July on a vacant duplex in Macon, and I helped him get 2 tenants it was a duplex. So one living on one side, one living on the other side, and now it's fully occupied. And it was a matter of months. And the only reason we was somewhat delayed is because we had to purchase appliances and get those appliances delivered. And we all know sometimes they're a little bit backed up. But it truly is something that you can do. You know, sometimes we just got to get over the mental hurdle and then just making sure that the assets are there. So here's an owner occupancy scenario. So someone maybe is currently renting, has a decent amount of savings, decent credit, debt to income, and a decent debt to income ratio. I don't know if anybody has heard of house hacking. So now this may work for maybe my younger crowd, right? Younger, maybe a crowd that's not married. But house hacking is when you live in one of a multiple unit property and or a property that may have like a basement, and you have renters rent those other units. And the idea is that those people are paying your mortgage for you and you're just living there. You have the asset as your own, but you are collecting rent instantly. And you can use owner occupied financing, which is FHA, for this type of process. Now, I will tell you these numbers are old, so I don't know if we're getting a whole lot at $285,000 right now, but with between about $5,000 and $10,000 in savings, a buyer can purchase a property between $142,000 and $285,000, assuming that 3.5% is required for the down payment. And then, like I said, you will rent those other rooms and or rent those other units if you have a multi-unit property. So scenario 3, you have a decent amount of savings, less than stellar credit, and renting to own, or you own an owner occupied home. So here's the thing. So we could all get together, pool our funds together and say, hey, y'all, let's go in on a property together. If you pool your family, friends, and see what they want to do, and if you each contribute $10,000, you have the purchasing power of $150,000, assuming a 20% down payment is required. As I mentioned, there's some properties in Macon, $150 to get you something really nice for as far as an investment property goes. And again, you've pulled it together. You didn't put all of your cake in there. And like I said, the way I really like this slide, because a piece of cake is better than no cake at all. I mean, personally, I like cake, so, you know, that really helps too. But I'd rather have a slice than none, you know? So again, if I'm 33% partner in a property, I'd rather that 33% than 0%. So this is something, again, pooling your funds together is an option as well that I want you guys to consider. So now I'm going to go into some myths I want to dispel, and then I'll open it up for some questions. So 1, if you are pre-approved for one amount and find a home for less than what you're pre-approved for, you can use the difference in the 2 amounts for renovation. No, no. If you're buying a house, if you're pre-approved for 200, you're buying a house for 150, your loan will be off of 150. Now, there is a loan product called the 203K loan. That is a renovation loan product. It's an FHA product that will allow you to use some additional money to renovate the house, but they're just not going to say, oh, okay, you're pre-approved for 200. Let me give you $200,000 unless the house is in fact $200,000. So the other myth is that the down payment is the only expense to close. You have heard me mention that you have closing costs. Those closing costs will include your attorney's fees, intangible taxes, transfer taxes. You'll have some like the prorated taxes for the month, prorated interest, title insurance. So these are things that are included in those closing costs. Now, sellers you can negotiate sellers to contribute to closing costs, We are back in a market where sellers are willing to contribute some, which I'm happy to be back in. But I don't want you to think that the down payment is the only expense that you have to close on a property. If you have a 30-year mortgage, you have to live in the house for 30 years. I hear this all the time. Pretty much what they're giving you 30 years to pay them back. So they're spreading that amount over 30 years, but there's nothing that says you have to stay in that house for 30 years. Again, it's just the amount of time they're giving you to pay that mortgage back. Most loans right now do not have a prepayment penalty. So let's say you go buy your house and you win the lottery and you want to pay it off. Go ahead and pay it off. And then you own the property outright. So you can afford, another myth is that you can afford a mortgage payment of at least the amount of rent that you pay each month. Again, we go back to our debt to income ratio. The lender is only going to want you to pay 45% of your income towards debt. So your landlord says, I just want my rent. I don't care if you have, beans to eat. I just want my rent. They're not necessarily, they should, but they're not necessarily looking at your affordability. But again, just because you pay $2,200 in rent does not mean that that's what your payment, the lender is going to pay, allow you in a mortgage. I mentioned this before, but another myth is that you cannot have student loans and qualify. I should have wrote that a little differently, that you can have student loans and qualify, that you can. Again, minimum monthly payments on your student loans. It's not that the fact that you have them, as long as you're in good standing with them and the minimum payment is not eating up a lot of your income, you can qualify for a home with student loans. Another myth is that you must purchase an owner-occupied property first. I literally had a client, he was one of my first clients and a really good friend of mine. He bought in 2009 and he was like, Raquel, quite frankly, I've loved living here for 12 years, but I just want to go to an apartment where I can call the maintenance person to come fix things. Okay, no problem. But I say that to say you can choose to live in an apartment and then own a rental property. And that rental property rent can pay your rent at the other place. So I want people to start thinking that they just have to purchase a property to live in. They can purchase a property, an investment property, and that monthly income can assist them with covering other expenses. This is my favorite. You should wait until you're married to buy real estate. Please don't. Please don't. Now, again, I use it in a joking manner, but quite frankly, we don't know when he or she is coming along, right? We don't know if your current boyfriend, girlfriend is going to propose, but don't miss out on an opportunity waiting for that to happen, because you could be missing out on opportunities. And quite frankly, I like the idea of bringing people together, like bringing the assets together. So if your spouse has a real estate asset, you have a real estate asset, imagine selling those assets and being able to collectively buy your dream home faster because you have access, you are able to leverage the investment that you made. So I always say, I'm like, why are we waiting to buy? Just, oh, I'm waiting for my spouse to come along. Again, like I said, we hope they are coming, but I mean, unless you've been given a date and time, why are we waiting? Another myth is that renting is bad. It's not bad. And quite frankly, as a landlord, I appreciate renters because they're paying my mortgage and I appreciate them. So, and that goes back to the other myth. You have to buy owner occupied. If you choose to rent, that is on you, but that doesn't mean that you don't necessarily invest in real estate. That just means that you may not be investing in your owner occupied property. And renting, like I said, is not a bad thing. It is just, again, I'm encouraging you to consider homeownership and whatever that looks like. Another myth is that entrepreneurs cannot qualify for a mortgage. That's not true either. Now their income reporting, because entrepreneurs as one, we write off a lot of stuff. So our income doesn't really truly reflect what we are actually earning. But as I mentioned, the lender is going to want to say like, okay, you made $15, how can you qualify for this house? So you're going to have to adjust your taxes, tax returns, and how you report your income. But entrepreneurs can buy a house. And I encourage you to have a conversation with your tax accountant, have a conversation with a mortgage broker to understand what you need to do to position yourself to qualify for a loan. And that's all I have for you folks. So feel free to contact me. This is the QR code to my Zillow page. And with any questions, comments, I would love to dispel any additional myths, make you comfortable, get you on a path. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but I just want you to be on the general path towards investing in real estate, whatever that looks like. Again, you can rent and own. I like to think of homeownership as renting from myself. I'm paying myself my mortgage, my rent each month as a homeowner. So I thank you guys for the opportunity to speak to you. I hope you have learned some things, hope you can use some things, and look forward to hearing some questions.
So yes, okay. So first of all, that's a lot of information. You have given us amazing information. Okay, and so yes, there are a lot of questions. I do ask our participants, if you have not had a chance to do so, please put your questions in the chat. If we come across questions that are very similar, then we won't repeat, but we're going to try to get to all the questions that are in at this time. Okay. All right. So you touched base on the different things that go into the closing costs. You mentioned attorney fees, the different taxes, the title insurance. So how do you help determine maybe how much one should ask the seller to contribute in closing costs? How do you arrive at that? How do you say we should ask for 3,500 or 5,000 or 7,500? How do you estimate how much a client should expect to pay for their closing costs?
So I really would say it's more of an art than a science. So in the sense of, if you're going to try to air quote lowball the seller, I try to be a little more realistic. Like, you want closing costs, but you're offering 20,000 under. You may want to bring that up a little bit to cover those closing costs, because what the seller is basically doing is taking away from their net proceeds at the end. So a lot of it is an assessment of what they currently have they owe on their mortgage, what their net proceeds will be. And then sometimes it's really a shot in the dark, right? So you ask for the world and see what they come back with, right? You may ask for $15,000, and then they may say, I'll give you 5. And you may say, okay, thank you. So it really kind of depends on your scenario. Now, there are some limits, right? So there's some loans that will say a seller can only contribute up to 6%. But that is something that amount will come from the seller, that will come from the mortgage broker based off of the loan product. And 2, having a conversation with the loan officer can help too, because we can say, okay, so because we're pushing the budget a little bit, Raquel, they really need 10,000 in closing. Okay, let me try to see if I can go get that some way, somehow. So there is, like I said, it's kind of like a lot of give and take, but there's no set formula to say like the sellers will contribute this. It really kind of depends on situation based. But you can expect closing costs to range between 3 and 4% of the purchase price.
Okay, that's good. Okay, next question. So someone says, I saw online that some people are purchasing a home in their investment accounts. How does one do that? Do you recommend doing that?
You said in their investment accounts?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's if the person is referencing like as part of their investment account or using the money from their investment account. I know you mentioned that you could go into
Your
a
retirement.
401k, a retirement. So let's just go from that angle.
Okay.
Have you recommended to clients that they do that if they're looking to purchase a home, use some money from their investment accounts?
So again, I'm a caveat my answers to the question. A lot of it's situation based, right? So again, if I'm dealing with a younger person, I would say yes, because you're not so far from close to the retirement age, right? Maybe if you're closer to retirement, maybe I say, but again, if it's a pool of money that you have access to, why not utilize it if you don't have the cash on hand to use it for your down payment? Then I think it definitely is something to consider. And the way that you go about it is you have to be under contract, and then you would reach out to your retirement company and let them know what you're trying to do. And you have to like submit a request. I don't know that, like, I haven't done it, you know, in a literal sense, but they have to have a copy of the final contract and know what the amount of money that they need to pull out. So that conversation is a lot of between the lender and the buyer. But it definitely is something to consider. Like I said, kind of depending on how much you have in your retirement account, you know, how close you are to retirement age. But yeah, I definitely think it's a good option to consider. And I've had a couple of buyers utilize that and are happy as a clam.
Okay. Okay. So this participant says, good evening. I'm so glad the speaker just touched on student loans. This is a recurring concern for me when considering purchasing property. Can the speaker please clarify what a reasonable amount is for a monthly student loan payment?
So it really will depend on your income. So, because again, what they're looking at is your minimum payment. So if, you know, depending on how, you know, much of your how much your minimum payment is taken up out of your income will determine what's a reasonable amount. But like the best advice I can give you is to have a conversation with a loan officer, because while you may think, oh man, I'm paying $350, that's taking a lot of my money. But again, some of this is relative. As I mentioned, the kind of anecdote story about the lady who thought she had a low credit score at 620. I mean, again, I have a high credit score. So if I'm in the sixes, I'm like, whoa, like, what am I doing with my life? You know, but it's all relative, right? So again, the relative, it goes back to the student loan payment. So you may think it's high, but it may be actually reasonable, and the lender will be the one to help you determine if it is in fact reasonable.
Okay. So that kind of lends itself to this next question. What, as a realtor, do you consider a high income? So you have a client that comes to you and, you know, would you say it's six figures? Would you say it's 50,000? Or is that again, like relative?
Relative. Because again, someone who may make $50,000 and has no debt, probably, and then my $150,000 person who their income is eaten up by everything, technically the $50,000 person has more money, you know, to play with. So it is relative. But like, so for example, when I use that as an example, my friend, she probably was at 130, 145,000. And I just know that that client was a good friend of mine. So I knew that she would be sticker shocked if she got her actual pre-approval amount. Like, again, they may have said, oh, you're pre-approved for $750,000. And she would have been like, whoa, like, I don't want that much house. So I said, well, start with telling them how much you want to pay. So I think she had, at the time, it was a relatively low interest rate, or I think she maybe started at like a 5, because it was like 2018. And so she had told them 1,800 is what her comfortable point was. And then they came back and said, okay, at this interest rate, your pre-approval amount is, I think it was about 350,000.
Okay. Okay. This person says, I want to rent out my primary residence and purchase a new primary residence. How would the bank consider my debt to income ratio in this instance?
So what they're going to do is take 75% of your, I believe it's of the mortgage. No, excuse me. They're going to take 75%, and don't hold me exactly to this, but because I had this question to one of my mortgage broker friends. I believe they take 75% of the monthly rent. And then they say, does that 75% cover your mortgage? And if it covers your mortgage completely, then it's kind of a wash. But if it's a little bit, less, then they're going to count that towards your income, the difference towards your income. But you're going to have to provide proof that you have a tenant in that property to be able to eliminate that air quote debt from your debt to income ratio.
I got you. Okay. All right. Okay. We're going to keep going. You good? Can we keep going?
Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. If someone is considering purchasing a home on one income, so not a dual income household, just one income, what are some good ways to weigh the pros and cons versus FHA versus conventional?
So that's going to be a good conversation with your lender. One, it probably has to do with your amount of down payment. It's also going to have to do with your amount of debt to income ratio. FHA is a little bit more forgiving on debt to income ratio than conventional. So I've had the clients go to the lender and say, I may have even I've submitted an offer saying they were going to go conventional. And then after having a conversation with the lender and going over those pros and cons, they decided to go FHA. So then I had to go back to the seller and switch the financing from conventional to FHA. When you're doing a loan that is less than 80% loan to value, so if you're putting 20% down, then you don't have what they call mortgage insurance premium. It's not a bad thing to have MIP, mortgage insurance premium. It's just an extra added expense. It can drop off when your value gets to a certain point, but they're just trying to protect themselves from foreclosure. So like I said, that determining which loan product is the best for you will really depend on what the loan officer assesses your debt to income ratio at, how much down payment you have. But honestly, like I try to tell some of the sellers when they want to, scoff at the FHA loans, and I'm like, by the time you get your money wired to your account, it will be the same if whether it was cash, conventional, FHA, VA. So let's just roll with it, right? But I wouldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other. The only way would be if you put 20% down, but you don't have to put 20% down. I probably should have had that as a myth on my slide, because a lot of times when I'm watching, Good Morning America, and they're giving examples of this homeownership, they keep saying 20%. And so even some of my most intelligent friends are like, I don't have 20%. And I was like, well, who told you needed 20%? Well, I was reading an article, and I'm like, see, they're not really truly telling the story that you can get a loan. Again, there's 100% loans, the 3.5%, 5%, 10%. And so it really, the finance side is having that good conversation with a mortgage lender and your bank to determine which loan product is going to be the best for you, and, generate like a reasonable monthly payment that you're comfortable with.
Okay, so that's a good time for someone put in a comment more so than a question. So I'll go ahead and read the comment. The person said, you can also participate in programs like NACA or NACA. It's Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, which allows you no down payment, no closing costs, no mortgage insurance, and no fees. They also have below market
Correct. I,
interest
in
rates.
fact, just closed a NACA loan today, and it was my first one. Okay. Now, what
okay.
I like, so I like all the things that it comes with. What gives me pause is it just takes a long time to get there, right? So, like if you're considering using the NACA program, I need you tonight to enroll, because, the client that closed today, now, granted, she had a unique situation because she bought a new construction home, so it had to be constructed. So naturally, we were going to have a long waiting period, right? But she had already taken the classes by the time we got to the point of the contract. Okay. So I truly recommend having all of that done before we start the search process, because like I said, it is kind of a long process, and it's great at the end, right? Because that when we saw her interest rate, we saw her payment, we were like, ooh, but it was a very long process, and there was a little bit of hiccups, but again, as I mentioned, there's those obstacles that are naturally going to come in any transaction. And I did tell my client, I said, well, these obstacles were easy. It was just a little baby bump, right? Compared to some of the things I've had to deal with. But I would just say I like the NACA program, but would highly recommend that people go ahead and start the process now, because it is a kind of a longer process to get to the end goal than if you just qualified, went to the mortgage broker.
Okay. Another participant has this question. Are these preliminary steps that you had in the PowerPoint, are they the same for buying a new build and a
Resale?
A resale? Are they pretty much the same
Yes.
steps? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Another question. I've heard of instances where the seller pays for or partially pays for closing costs. Are any of the costs listed included, or are they separated? So I'm interpreting this question. Let me go back. I've heard of instances where the sellers pay for or partially pays for closing costs. Are any of the costs listed included, or are they separate? The breakdown, when the seller is agreeing to pay the $5,000, then the lender applies that to the total of the closing costs. There's not like a breakdown where the seller says, I'm paying for this, I'm paying for that. Okay. Can you talk to us about the concept of buying down your interest rate?
Yes. So that is something that the seller paid closing costs can go to as well, is buying down the interest rate. So the lender is going to say, okay, hey, 1 point is, let's see, $5,000, and it's going to be based off of the loan amount, the buy down, but it basically is you're paying more money up front to have a lower interest rate.
Okay.
Now there's a couple of different options. So there's like permanently buying it down. And so again, we're at that 7%. You may say, okay, I got this extra cash. I really want my payment to be what I want my payment to be. I'm willing to put that extra cash up to buy down my interest rate. But it is upfront. So a down payment, closing costs, discount points. So it is an extra closing cost that's going to be on top of the other things that you have to pay. So if you have the money, you're willing to forego the liquid cash, something to consider. Another option is what they call a 2-1 buy down. I've done a couple of these now and that 2-1 buy down, the seller has to pay for it. But what you're doing is you're buying down the points, 2 points for the first year. The second year, it will go down 1 point. And then the third year, you go to your regular interest rate. Now, the idea behind this is to make it more affordable up front for those of us with jobs, or, we don't know what year 3 will look like, right? We're hoping we've earned some additional money. We hope we've paid down some debt. So when we get to that higher payment, we're a little bit more comfortable with that higher payment than we were up front, right? So that's an option as well, what they call a 2-1 buy down. And like I said, the seller has to be the one that fits that bill. And the lender will tell you how much you need to ask for that 2-1 buy down. Because it's not just a simple like, oh, okay, I'm buying it for $400,000. I need that. The lender has to say, okay, we need $8,000 for the buy down. So then the realtor will go back to the seller, listing agent, because we're not talking directly to the seller. We'll go back to the listing agent and say, hey, we need $8,000 for this 2-1 buy down. And it's something specifically that has to be called out on the contract that's what that money is going to be used for.
Okay. All right. Next question. And we have a few more minutes. My fiance has purchased and sold properties, and I have never purchased a property. If we got married before I purchase, can I still buy the home independently and qualify for a first-time buyer program?
Yes. Yes. So honestly, so depending on your income, if you qualify for the down payment assistance programs, I literally had a couple. Now they didn't end up buying, but I told them, I said, I'm gonna be honest with you, because y'all are on the cusp of that income qualification. Buy the house before you get married, because you don't have a air quote material relationship until you are married. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're married, those down payment assistance programs, some of them will look at the entire household income. So they're going to be looking to see like, oh, nope, they got $100,000. They don't qualify. But if you're still single on paper, they're just going to look at it as you.
Okay.
So definitely something to consider. I mean, if you have your wedding date set, maybe not push it, but you know, depending on where, you know, where you're at and how far the date out is, you may want to consider utilizing that down payment assistance program if you are income qualified for it.
Okay. All right. This person has a question about credit score qualifications. So I'm guessing you did tell us that the 580 is about the lowest score. They wanted to know, well, the first question is, I have a question about credit scores qualifications. So the second part is, how long should one be employed at their current job? I guess when you're getting ready to apply for the loan. So on that first part, is it that there is a floor, let's say 580, but the higher the credit score, then the better the lender, the better you look in the lender's eyes, or
yes,
going
the
to
better,
get a lower interest? Okay.
better you look, a better interest rate, or ability to get a better interest rate. And it really kind of creates a better trust, you know, relationship with the underwriter and the lender to, if you have the higher credit score. Like I said, it can be done, but your fees may be a little higher because of that higher interest rate. And then what was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question was how long should you be employed at your current?
Yes. I would say 2 years. But I will say that I've had clients or lenders tell me that if you are fresh out of school, out of college, you can qualify within that first year if you have, you know, a job secured, and because they count the school years as working, which I can agree with, but but yes, I would say shoot for 2 years. But you know, again, there are some caveats to that. And then for the entrepreneurs, you definitely want to be in business for at least 2 years and show some profit.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to jump around a little bit. So someone is asking about the programs like first time home buyers okay, so I'll just read it exactly like I said. Are there programs for first time home buyers as a homeowner who entered into the current mortgage 23 years ago? So, and then what about if I were to purchase a home with my loved one who will be a first time home buyer? So it looks like maybe it could be a person who's been in their home for years, and now they're looking to assist someone who's trying to be a first-time home buyer.
So typically the rule is like for the Georgia Dream program, that's the state down payment assistance program. You can't have owned a house or have ownership interest in a house for the last 3 years.
Okay. Okay.
So that would, if that person still has ownership interest in that house for 23, I would have to add, that's a very nuanced situation.
Okay.
So I'd have to kind of ask some questions. I do have a point of contact at Georgia Dream. So I'm not exactly 100% confident that they would qualify if, like I said, there's still a mortgage and if they're the ownership interest part of it. But what the website says is no ownership interest within the last 3 years. Okay. And as far as her buying it together, and now again, that goes back to whether or not if the combined income would qualify you for the down payment assistance programs.
Got you. So then that lends itself to this next question. The person is asking, is it better to apply with your partner, or should you use the partner, or should you just use the partner who has better financial standing? So
again,
I guess it
really depends, right? So depends on how much savings you have. So again, if we're trying to use a down payment assistance program, you may want to try to do it by yourself, because depending on the collective household income and relationship status. But if let's just say like one spouse may have better credit, but the other spouse has higher income. So you may want to collectively do it together because you guys can balance each other out. And it also depends on, again, how much money you have to put down.
Mhm.
So, you know, like I said, some of the scenarios, that's the sometimes the beauty and the curse of real estate, right?
Yeah.
There's no cookie cutter answer per se, because I've had some buyers, I was like, oh, I don't even know how we got past underwriting, but here we are, you know. And then there's people that just skirt all the way through just because their file is so clean. But we can navigate through. And like I said, the mortgage brokers and lenders that I work with will help put you on a plan and help you assess your situation on how you should truly apply what makes the most sense based off of your financial status, based off of how much you have saved, based off of the interest rate, loan products available, and the like.
So this follow-up is a different person. And the question is being asked, in a marriage, or our income, is the income automatically combined when purchase a home if you're married, or can it be done separately so you can have a home ownership in multiple properties? Like, my husband's going to buy this one outright, I'm going to buy this one outright, we put our money together to buy this one.
Yes, you can do that. So yes, but you wouldn't be using down payment assistance. So yes, and Georgia is not a community property state. So if I wanted to go buy a house right now without my husband's name on it, I could do that. So,
Okay.
and it could just be in Raquel Obumba's name. And vice versa. Now, again, where the caveats come is when people try to use those down payment assistance programs. But as someone who, if you have money, access to the money, gift funds, whatever it looks like, you can purchase a property separate from your spouse, you know. And that's not necessarily saying you're not happy or whatever. It's just, again, I'm going to go buy this investment property because, you know, I'm just going to use my income. So he doesn't air quote, add to his debt to income ratio on his credit, right? Keep his credit open, and I'm going to use my credit.
Okay. There's another question. What are your thoughts on construction to permanent loans and building a home with the interest rates being so high right now? I guess a construction.
Yeah. So I say date the rate, marry the house. I'm hoping these rates will go down. But I mean, I tell my clients to focus on affordability, at least specifically from the investment perspective, because I'm like, if you're not paying the mortgage, as long as you're comfortable with your net profit, why are you worried about the interest rate? Because you're not paying the mortgage. The tenant is paying the mortgage for you. But from the owner occupied construction to perm loan, I mean, again, I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball to know when the rate is going to go down. But as long as you're comfortable with the payment, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
If you have the land and you want to do a custom built home, I say go for it. And then, like I said, but focus on affordability. So don't stretch yourself too thin. And quite frankly, the lender's not going to let you stretch yourself too thin. But go ahead and like I said, have someone assess what that monthly payment will look like. And then you say, okay, I'm comfortable with that. Then go for it.
Okay. We're getting down to our last couple questions.
Okay.
And so I want to make sure that we honor the time, but also honor the questions that have been asked. So someone has a scenario and they want your kind of pros and cons. It says, my husband and I, homeowners, are currently renting out an apartment that we acquired specifically for Airbnb. We plan to save the funds we receive to eventually purchase an investment property. Do you think this is a good route to go? Please explain the pros and cons of doing it this way.
Wait, say the question one more time for me.
My husband and I, parentheses, homeowners, are currently renting out an apartment that we acquired specifically for Airbnb. We plan to save the funds we receive to eventually purchase an investment property. Do you think it's a good route to go? Please explain the cons and pros of doing it this way. So I guess they have an apartment and they Airbnb it out. So the funds that they are getting, they're using toward saving because they're going to use those funds.
So
for
they don't
property.
own the apartment?
It does not, the way it's worded, it doesn't look like they are staying in the apartment, but they are renting it out. But I've seen it both ways, where people are staying in the apartment, but they will put it on Airbnb and then leave if it gets rented out. So I've seen it both ways. It's not clarified in this.
Listen, I'm always here for a side hustle and getting the money. So if it's helping you build up that savings, absolutely, I would say that I think it's a good idea. But like I said, it would just kind of, I mean.
Oh, they're renting it out. She said, we're renting the apartment out.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely, if that's helping you build the savings up to allow you to buy that investment property, again, putting that 20% down, then absolutely, I think it's a great idea.
Okay. There was one about, I want to make sure I don't skip it. We asked the construction one. This one was a question, but you did sort of answer it. And I believe it was about their currently in a home. Oh yeah, when purchasing investment property, how does the lender treat your debt to income ratio, since the assumption is that the unit will be occupied? So you did answer that with the earlier question of the person who had a primary residence and then they want to.
Yeah, and I do want to add that they'll do a specific add-on to the appraisal to assess like the rental income. So yeah, they're still going to assess your debt to income ratio and make sure that you're, can cover it, because ultimately you want it occupied, but let's be real, like there may be some vacancies. So you also personally don't want to position yourself where you can't afford the mortgage. Fortunate for my husband and I, we have only had 2 months of vacancy since we became landlords per se. And so we haven't necessarily had to pay the mortgage, but we're at a position where if we had to and they decided to move out, we'd be comfortable with the monthly payments.
Okay.
But they are going to assess your debt to income ratio in a similar manner.
Okay. There is a final question about, how does bankruptcy affect obtaining a home loan?
So depending on how long ago the bankruptcy was, I had a client that closed last year that went through bankruptcy. I'm not 100% sure what the time frame. I want to say my memory is serving like 7 years. And it also depends on the type of bankruptcy that you filed, and like kind of where you're at in your status of it. But I have had a client successfully purchase a property who did go through bankruptcy. So it's an option. I mean, it's still homeownership is still something you can consider after going through bankruptcy. It really just depends on where you're at in the process and the type of bankruptcy that you filed.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you. I have like a couple of questions that are they weren't in the chat, but I just want to ask you, but I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to look in the chat and complete the survey. It's a quick survey, but we want to continue to bring you the information that you desire. And we know that this was a session that we had a large request for. So we are always wanting to bring in experts, and Raquel is truly an expert in this field. And so we really want your feedback, and hope that you had an opportunity to get her information so that you can absolutely patronize if you so choose, or ask additional questions. Now, Raquel, you said you have investment properties. Do you recommend that if someone is purchasing an investment property in, let's say, Macon, would you recommend that they use a property management company, or try to do that themselves with the whole attending to the tenant's needs, or if there's a water main break, and normally they would, if you have a property management company, they'd call that company. But what's kind of your take on it?
It depends on your personality. So I do my own property management. I mean, naturally, right? But and I do property management for other people. But like, so for example, my client that has recently hired me as a property manager, this person travels a lot and does not have time for the petty. My water pressure is low, and my, the light's not working, and so he's the type of person that does need a property manager. But here's the thing, right? So as I mentioned, it depends on your personality, but I always say you can change it, right? So you may say, you know what, I'm gonna save that 10% that I'm gonna pay my property manager and do it myself. And then when you become getting overwhelmed, you may say, you know what, let me go ahead and find somebody and get that 10%. So, and again, that could change. You may say, okay, now my schedule's a little bit more free, and I'm able to manage it. Because I mean, really, quite frankly, property management is easy if your house is in good condition, right? But we never, just like our own personal homes, we don't know when something is going to break down. And property, as a property manager, I will say you have months where you're just like, bet they paid their rent on time, no calls, and then out the blue you'll get a call. Like the call I got when they were like, Miss Raquel, the Uber driver ran into the house. I was like, oh my gosh. So it was something that, you had to deal with. So I really, the answer would be, it depends on your personality, your schedule, your structure. I know for me, like I said, when I'm working with my investor clients, my first time investor clients, I send them a spreadsheet because this is how I keep track of all my stuff. For tax purposes, if you need, obviously utilize your resources. Hey, I don't know a plumber in Macon, call somebody, again, I'm a prime, our other investment property is in Macon. I've gotten, in contact with certain contractors for different things. So I can recommend people. So it really just depends, like I said, your personality, your organization, your structure, your time management, your responsiveness, your travel schedule. But I think I'm confident, everybody on this call is very smart. They can probably do their own property management and save those 10%. But again, if you begin to get overwhelmed with the property management, then it may be time to hire somebody to assist.
Okay. And last question, because I want to give everybody time to complete the survey. Please, guys, complete the survey. But I want to ask you this. Do you have experience with dealing with online lenders? Okay, so you see the commercials on TV, right? I won't name them, but we see the commercials on TV. Do you have experience where you've had clients that have used online lenders, and have you found the process to be similar with them? Is it more cumbersome? What's been your experience with that?
I'm going through my brain trying to think who has recently closed. A lot of times people end up with one of my preferred lenders or their bank.
Okay.
So when I have a buyer that expressed interest in using, possibly new construction, I tell them to go to one of those online lenders just to make sure they're in fact qualified, because there's no personal relationship with these people, right? It's just, they're providing you, yep, you're qualified for $450,000, right? So then, going to the new construction people that you can in fact buy this house, you can afford this house. Because the reason I do that is because a lot of times the new construction builders will have a preferred lender that they use, and they will offer you incentives for using their lender. Extra closing costs, refrigerator, just little financial incentive. Now we can, get into the depths of where they hide that money, whatever. But I feel like I have closed one. I just can't remember in like recent times someone that used an online lender. I'm pretty confident they can get it done. Because they have every interest in getting it done, because that's when they get paid, just when the realtor gets paid. You get paid at closing. So I'm pretty confident that they'd be able to do it. I just, like I said, more often than not, as people reach out to me, they have not been pre-qualified or pre-approved. And so then I recommend people that I work with for them to go to them, and they typically will utilize those people. Or if they're pre-qualified, it's usually their bank, some of the, military people may, use their banks, because they have those 100% loans and stuff like that, and they're comfortable with it where their accounts are.
Okay.
So for the most part, I don't have a lot of experience with them, but I would say I'm confident that they'd still be able to get the job done.
Can you tell us about how long the home buying process is? You gave us the kind of the timeline. Is that like generally 30 days? Would you say successful happens within 30 days?
Yeah, I would say the typical amount is 30 days. Commercial is going to be longer. So if somebody's in the considering commercial, it's going to be longer. Just expect that.
Okay.
But I would say expect 30 to 45 days total.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. We are right at 8:29. We could go all night, but
Yeah.
we're not. But clearly, this is a topic that is of such interest, and you're right. Owning property and real estate in whatever capacity, it truly is a generational wealth building venture. And so we thank you so much for taking the time tonight, lending your expertise. And it is our hope that the participants on tonight will reach out to you with additional questions or even if they are interested in purchasing either a primary home or real estate investment property. So again, we thank you, participants. We thank you. We will do another webinar in February, which is going to be focused on eliminating debt. But again, we thank you so much, Raquel. We thank our participants, our hosts, and everyone who participated tonight. And so with that, we hope that you all have a wonderful night, and I will conclude at 8:30.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning
Thank
in.
you.